especially those that are in the health and human service area. Those programs are heavily focused on saying what's wrong, what's missing, what are the needs, right? And the last institution, I think we hear about over and over again, the last institution is the downtown newspapers, the downtown television stations, and the national news media. I know that in Chicago, we recently took a Chicago newspaper and just went through one newspaper and began to read what it was saying about our neighborhoods and our city. And here are some of the headlines from one newspaper, one day. Violence scaring off voters. Domestic violence endless cycle. Grandmother says she told DCFS that slain boy had been beaten. Banks post record as robbers rally. Only 2 show interest in school board seats. 2 teens held in slaying of Star. Futile calls to 9/11 show police indifference. And that's the portrait that the media gives us of our community. Now, Ramona, what's happening in Washington?
Well, we know in Washington very much what you're saying here, I'm afraid. Looking at our media, listening to our universities, trying to seek funds, we almost have to refer to ourselves as disadvantaged, at risk. These very negative labels that I consider self-fulfilling prophecies. You would think that all of our boys are drive-by shooters and all of our girls are crack moms who desert their babies as border babies in the hospitals. And it is a very, very glass empty picture that we get from the media here in Washington, I'm afraid.
So what we really saw in neighborhoods across the country was a struggle, actual struggle over who are we. And the struggle is against the combined voices of 5 institutions. The great intellectual institution of the community, the university, the great philanthropies of the community, the United Way and the foundations, right? The government and its programs, and the communication system. When you have those powerful institutions broadcasting over and over and over again to people what's important about you, what's wrong, what's missing, finally some communities under the onslaught, they finally succumb and they really begin to deteriorate because they believe that they are nothing but an empty place filled with empty people. Now it is clear that communities are built on the basis of capacities and not deficiencies. And it is clear that there are great institutions saying deficiencies are what we want or need. And it would be all right if these deficiencies and these counts of needs were just used by these outside institutions and it didn't have any consequence in the neighborhoods. But in fact, what they do have devastating consequences in the neighborhoods. And Joe, I wonder if you could review what the effect of a constant bombardment of needs, deficiencies has upon neighborhood life.
Yeah, I want to do it briefly because it makes me angry to think about it.
Yes.
I think, John, that you touched on the first, and that is to say that although it's very clear that Mrs. Johnson and the thousands of people like her in communities across the United States didn't have the idea themselves that they were a collection of needs and problems and deficiencies, that sometimes some of Mrs. Johnson's neighbors begin to think, when the institutions are hammering on it time after time after time, that that's true. That's all we are. And once that happens, as all of you know who are interested in community building, we have a very high hill to climb in order to get back out into community building activity. I want to just tick off very quickly a couple of other, what I think are very devastating consequences, though, of the power of this needs map. And remember, we're never saying the problem with the needs map is that it's a false map. It's true, but it's not the whole truth. The power of the needs map does devastating things to community leadership. It is clear to us now that leadership which is designated as leadership because it attracts money to the communities, right? I mean, that's one of the ways you get designated a leader. That's what people respect. That the game we have set up for local leaders is, let's get up in the morning here in the neighborhood and do the best job we can of painting the needs map, of talking about the emptiness and the problem. In other words, let's do the best job we can at denigrating our neighbors, at making sure that when people think about our neighborhood, they think about deficiency and needs and problems, right? And then, if I'm a neighborhood leader, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to lead. Now, at least part of what leadership is finding and mobilizing people's resources and gifts, right? That's what leadership is. How do we bring people to the table to give their gifts, right? But I've just said there aren't any in my neighborhood. Look at what we don't have. Do you see why neighborhood leaders burn out, get schizophrenic? We ask them to do impossible things. I think it's absolutely an evil thing we do to neighborhood leaders, right? But not only does that needs map devastate leadership, it also, I think, determines who gets the money and how the money comes into the neighborhoods. It comes in those little categories, categorical funding. Neighborhoods know that insofar as all these problems are real, they're all interrelated. They're all part of the same seamless web, right? But the money comes in for one little part of it. And the community wisdom that says, you know, this is all about community, right, gets, in fact, left behind. At the same time, this map, the needs map, supports money going to folks who work for all the institutions that are there to fill up, after diagnosing, empty people, right? All of the helping institutions. We found, in fact, that something like 1/3 of the dollars that go into city neighborhoods actually go, targeted to poor people, actually go